We're back with a bonus conversation you'll only see here on CBS News New York. So guys, in addition to his problems with the raid on his campaign finance chairman, the mayor has to do a budget cut, a budget modification this coming week. In fact, it's due by Thursday. And it's going to be a 5% cut. And he's already said these are going to be, quote, heartbreaking cuts. So does that put him in even a deeper political hole because he's going to have to do things that are going to be unpopular?
Yeah, he's had the last two budgets he's passed. He's faced criticism from people over what was getting cuts and the typical budget dance of the libraries, the social programs, and these are only going to get worse. And the financial reality of the city is what it is. It's not necessarily the mayor's fault, but it's what he's dealing with. And I think it gives even more opportunity for any challenger to say the mayor has cut your library, the mayor has cut your budget at your school, your kids' social programs. We can't help people who need to get placed in housing. It's hard.
The challenge is always going to be anytime you cut. The city council puts its budget forward, and from there always have to be cuts. The mayor puts their budget forward, and compared to the city council, it always cuts. He's asked the agency heads to already cut the budgets, but you're always taking from somebody. There has to be somebody, the adult in the room, and that's what the mayor is doing, to step forward and say, we can't afford to pay for this all the time. And if we're going to keep on taxing people and raising taxes, they're going to leave New York City like they've been doing in droves. And if you're going to keep losing the tax base that way, look right now, even today in the paper, there's stories about city buildings right now being underwritten. The Helmsley building right in front of Grand Central is right now potentially under foreclosure. An icon of New York City, a historic area of the city that everyone knows near Grand Central. That building can no longer pay its bills for its mortgage. What is the city going to do when it can't pay its bills? So here's the situation. The state controller has come out with a report this past week that the city is expecting a budget gap of about $13 billion. How is the mayor going to fill that gap without painful cuts to things like public safety, education, sanitation, the things that voters care about? They don't want dirty streets. They don't want to feel unsafe.
It's hard. You can't. It's very difficult because we have lower than expected budget revenue, whether it's coming from taxes or just these cuts. We're still feeling the pain from COVID and obviously more money being spent on asylum seekers. That's why he's tried to get money from the feds. Well,
it says, but also Kathy Hochul. She has the opportunity to do for him what he did for her. He helped her tremendously during her last race. It's now time for the mayor to go back and get some of those one-time fixes, what they have to talk about, and to put the money back into safety and things of the sort.
The state has a budget gap too.
But the state has a different type of budget, a different time frame from when it has to pay its bills. Right now, there are ways the state can come forward, and the governor has shown she has access to funds before. She did it last time when she put cops in the subways, and she put cops on the street last time for her election. Let's do it again for the mayor and get his budget through and keep New York safe and keep people at their jobs.
Is that a reality? You think that Kathy Hochul could do that?
I don't think she can do it to the amount of money that the city needs. You know, it would be a little bit of a help. The city does have a rainy day fund. I guess me and some of the other reporters always ask, when is it raining enough for them to use this fund? Because I don't know what would trigger that use to actually tap into some of the money they've been saving over the years.
And that was replenished too. Under Bill de Blasio, it went down. It's now gone up a bit. You also have Joe Biden that can step up on the federal side if there's something that makes benefit to him during this next election as well.
But what impetus does Joe Biden have to try to bail the mayor out after his criticism of him has been unrelenting for the entire last year?
I think the short answer, as I said before, if it benefits the president during his coming election, if there's a way for him to find his way to support cops, to support firefighters, to support the libraries, education, things that where the money's being taken from to pay for the migrants, if he can't give money directly for the migrant crisis, there are ways he can do it across the board to help parts of the city.
Katie, listen, so the mayor, one of the big criticisms of the mayor is that his budget problems have been exacerbated by the fact that he negotiated all these very generous labor contracts without any givebacks. Does he now have to go back to the labor unions and say, okay, you have to give me something back. You have to give me pension changes or health benefit changes. And you know, that already is a third rail with the retirees. So what do you think?
I think it would be politically unwise for him to do it. Not to get into the technicality of doing that, because these labor contracts, it's sort of been his trophy over the last year of the uniformed agencies, 100%, and I forget the total for the non-uniformed agencies, but that's been his sort of big pride in what's been a really rough year for him politically as the mayor, dealing with a lot of other challenges. And I don't know if the unions would actually, you sign a contract, you kind of figure it out, you and your Office of Labor Relations and the head of that, you work on that and you celebrate that. To go back to change it would be a real issue for the mayor.
But it made his budget problem a lot bigger.
It also tackled a problem that had to be dealt with. There were non-contracts for many years. You also have pattern bargaining, and with the pattern bargaining going on right now, with everything going on across the city, the unions at this point are not the ones to give back when they had not zeros, but they didn't have any raises or any contract for many years. Now that they have them, they're staying put. Unless the city starts getting close to the B word, at this point, they're not going to start coming back at all.
So what does the mayor do? This is just the first 5%. There's going to be another 5% come January when he does his actual fiscal plan, and another 5% in May when he does his actual budget. So we're talking cuts of 15%. What's he going to do?
He has to go back to Albany again, too. He has to go to the Senate, where he used to serve. He has to go to the Assembly. He has the members here in New York City that serve across the city in all 5 boroughs, and see what they can do at this point to try to help the city. Also remember, in the state, how New York City goes, the state goes as well. There's a major issue there with that.
Are we talking about that dirty little word, raising taxes? Words, plural. Sorry.
Yeah, the city is limited in which taxes it can raise. And I think, you mentioned the budget cuts that are coming. There have been cuts already since he took office. There have been hiring freezes, there have been lots of stories about how that has negatively affected just regular New Yorkers. I mentioned earlier just the cuts and not hiring people at the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. It means you have fewer people to connect those looking to use vouchers to get into housing. So it continues to exacerbate affordable housing crisis just by lack of staff. There's just been a lot of challenges within, we have more than 300,000 city employees, and I think they've been feeling the pain as well. But, whether it's finding a way to raise some income, whether in the taxes the city can raise, he might have to look at that.
Well, I think hiring freezes is one way to keep on talking about it. You talk about some great workers across the city that stayed home and are working from home, working remotely, and they're doing a great job with it. Some are trying to do that and can't do that. As the men and women throughout the city decide to retire, there's an opportunity then to keep the headcount down, provide the services that need to be hired, kept like at HPD and others. But there's an opportunity here to look at some of the fat across the city and say, wait a second, as workers retire, we're not going to start backfilling them.
But, there's always like this budget dance that the mayor does with the city council. The mayor proposes, and there's always some slush fund somewhere, and the city council comes up with some way to ameliorate or deal with some of the cuts. Do you think that's going to be possible this time with such amount of money that they have to cut, that the city council will be able to have any kind of an effect to try to roll back some of the bigger things that he wants to do?
It'll be a much more complicated budget dance. And I've heard from people on the city hall end of the building, who say, look, the city council can do and say whatever they want, but the onus is on us to pass a balanced budget. So that's where a lot of that tension comes from. I know the mayor has discussed, okay, well, they should cut some of their discretionary funding that they usually dole out to nonprofits and other organizations.
But the nonprofits need the money.
Exactly. It's a cycle of the organizations who are getting the Schedule C funding in the budget. They're the ones who need it, because a lot of times they're providing services that the city can't because of budget cuts. So it's this kind of cyclical thing of catching up to others. And look, we have a city of more than 8 million people, and there are a lot of challenges for the people here. So it comes down to who needs the help and how are they getting it?
It's all politics local, don't forget. No city council member is going to want to say, cut my budget, cut something that hits me, whether it be their libraries, their education across the city. At the end of the day, someone's going to have to stand up and make the decisions. But again, the governor can step forward, the city council can do what it can, but at the end of the day, it's got to be outside New York City. When the forces from outside the city are causing this budget crisis, the migrant crisis, when you talk about the federal government and talk about the state government, they've got to step up.
Yeah. All right, last question. City council races. There were a couple of surprises. A Republican won in the Bronx for like the first time in like 40 or 50 years. And we also have the finance chair, Justin Brannan, who prevailed decisively over Ari Kagan, who made a calculation to change parties and become a Republican. What do you make of this?
The Bronx race and Marjorie Velasquez's loss, I think, was really interesting to see because, like you said, there hasn't been a Republican in the Bronx for a long time. Her vote in favor of rezoning in the district seemed to be what resonated the most with her voters. But I also think it goes down to turnout. You know, you have such a low turnout election. Was she pounding the pavement to get people out there? Was she doing that ground game that her opponent was?
But that part of the Bronx, too, on the eastern part, is really... It's on the water. It's a whole different part of the Bronx.
Yeah.
This is not the Grand Concourse. This is not Yankee Stadium.
Curtis Sliwa won that district in the mayoral race.
And the governor almost lost that race, that part of the district as well, the Bronx as well. Yeah. When you look at that part of the Bronx, it is not the Bronx as we're all used to at this point. And there was an uprising in the Bronx that got a Republican elected.
And the Justin Brannan, Ari Kagan race? Surprised?
I think, you know, seeing how close the race was for Justin Brannan in 2021, where he lost by a handful of votes. I'm sorry, he almost lost. He won, but it was very close. It had to go to the paper ballots. I don't like to make predictions. I thought he'd win, but not with as wide of a margin.
It was a decisive victory.
He won by more than we thought, but also I think if you had this conversation 2 months ago, we would have thought he was going to do what he did. What happened really with Israel and what happened at a local level in that race, it sort of turned up the burner quite a bit, made it a lot hotter in there, and he rose the occasion. He showed that he could pull it off.
But you might have thought that Ari Kagan might have profited a little bit. I hate to say that because of what's going on in Israel, but you would have thought that since he was, you know, he had fled Russia and he was Jewish and he was a strong supporter of Israel, that might have helped him, but it did not.
I think it did help him. I think it would have been a lot worse had he not had that benefit. Also, think about this. If this happened 2 years ago, we might have a different speaker in the city council. Brennan was running for speaker when he ran. He was looking ahead to the speaker's race, not just city council re-election when that election was so tight.
You agree with that?
Yeah, and I think that 2021 speaker's race was so compelling because Adrienne Adams is a speaker now. She sort of was the candidate least likely if you asked people who would win it. But Justin Brannan, I think you had a lot of factors. And I also think, too, he had, from people I spoke with, he had a much better ground game. He was just really out there. And also he didn't have, the district had changed because of redistricting, but, you know, I think that the voters still could cite specific things he'd done for them, and at the end of the day, that is what's going to get people to vote for you.
Tight race was a wake-up call last time, no question about it.
Katie, Helen, O'Brien, Murray, thank you for joining me. We really loved it. I've enjoyed it a lot, and thank you at home for joining me as well.